Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Point? I am, as every week, I'm just truly excited about my guest this week. He is one that was on my initial list of when you start your podcast, get Travis Thomas as a guest if it's at all possible. Hello, Travis. Thank you for joining us.
Bill, I appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm honored that I was on your short list.
Oh, you were right at the top, I assure you. So let me share some of, as best I can explain, who you are and what you do, because there's so many elements. But for those that don't know Travis, he is a performance coach and a trainer. He does his coaching and training both in the world of sports and in the world of business. He's been in corporations like Johnson & Johnson. He has worked with sports teams like the Chicago Cubs, the Georgia Bulldogs football team, the Miami Marlins, and a little team you may have heard of, the New York Yankees. He's an author of a great book that we'll talk about, 3 Words for Getting Unstuck. His past has been a leadership coach at IMG, and it's all built on a platform that he is an improvisational comedian.
That's right.
But before we go on, there's one more really cool thing, because I know it's like a dream job of yours, a dream position of yours. Travis is the leadership and team development specialist for the United States men's national team in the wonderful world of soccer.
That's right.
How excited were you to get that position?
Oh my gosh, you said it's a dream come true, and especially when it's not something that you're really necessarily trying to do. I mean, if you had asked me at any point in the last 10, 15 years that my work would give me the opportunity to work with the U.S. men's national team at some point, I would have been like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's fabulous. And the fact that it happened the way that it happened, not only me going in and being able to speak with the team, but sort of having a position on the coaching staff right now, and being able to work with the team and see the team from that sort of inner circle perspective is it's amazing. It's a dream come true, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Well, good. I know that the new coach for the team, Greg Berhalter, spoke to you and invited you on board for the staff, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And I'm going to stay on this topic because not only is it just really exciting, and anyone looking at YouTube, you'll see the joy and the excitement on Travis's face, and mine too. But the team just won the gold medal in the CONCACAF, if I've pronounced that correctly. And as we record this, Travis is preparing, along with the rest of the staff and team, to head to El Salvador for the first match in World Cup qualifying. Then they'll come back to Nashville to have a match with Canada, and then it's back to, I think, Honduras.
Yes, that's correct. So this is really where all of the work and all the preparation and everything that we've been doing for the last 3 years. I've been on the staff for about a year and a half now. But for the last 3 years, it's been really in preparation for what begins here in the beginning part of September, which is World Cup qualifying. And this is World Cup qualifying for the 2022 World Cup, scheduled for Qatar in November of 22. And so from September to March, we'll play 14 games over that time period. And it will either determine that we're in the World Cup or that we miss out, which we did in 2018. And so that's a 4-year that's a 4-year window. So when you don't qualify, that's a big major hit. And so all of our energy and focus is really on these qualifications. We've had, like you mentioned, we had a wonderful summer. We won two major tournaments, the CONCACAF Nations League tournament, beating Mexico in the final, and then the CONCACAF Gold Cup tournament, also beating Mexico in the final. And so we really come into qualification with a ton of momentum, but it doesn't mean anything because we all start off with a clean slate here starting in September.
Yeah, but I will tell you, when the team is in the World Cup and you're in Qatar, which is not too far from where I am right now, I hope you guys have trained in the heat, because it is going to be a hot tournament.
Yeah. I think that's why they moved it to November, actually, is because of the summer heat would have been unbearable.
Yeah, that'll help a bit, and I hope it is a cool spell. So, as exciting as that is, we really have to take a step back so everyone can understand how you ended up in that position in your dream job, and it started off really almost I don't want to say as a lark, but somewhat serendipitous, if I'm not mistaken, when you and your wife were in Boston. New young gun ready to run up the corporate ladder and you stopped at a comedy club, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So my wife and I, we had just moved to Boston. I think we were young, 23, and yeah, we're both just sort of working normal professional jobs in Boston. And one of the first weekends there, we stopped into an improv comedy theater. And sometimes when people hear that I do comedy, they think stand-up comedian, and
Right.
I don't do stand-up comedy. It's improvisational comedy where it's usually a group of like 3, 4, 5, 6 people, and you create a show together on the spot with no script, and it's very collaborative, and it's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. And so we saw a show, and I was blown away at the talent of these actors. And I walked away in amazement, like, hey, how do they do that? Like, what
Yeah.
skill set does it take in order to create that kind of storytelling and creativity? And so I wasn't looking to become a performer. I just I thought it'd be interesting to kind of find out how
Yeah.
they did it. So I signed up for their training center, and a level 1 class turned into taking 6 levels of classes over a year and a half, and just falling in love with it, with just light bulbs of inspiration going off left and right. And I decided to audition for a cast, and I made that cast, and then I made another cast, and I kind of worked my way up.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, a few years into it, I was performing on the stage as a main stage cast member, with the people that I was in awe of,
Yeah.
a few years previous. And so that just kind of started my journey of really getting into improvisation. And that was it from a performance standpoint. And then it kind of grew into a career from there.
So this is as good a time as any to mention your book, which is 3 words for getting unstuck. But those 3 words are live, yes, and that genesis is improv.
That's
How
correct.
does that come out of improv?
Yeah. So yes, and is the basis of improvisation. So any improv theater, any actor, anyone that's touched improvisation in any way has learned right away that all of improvisation is based off of yes and. So when I started my own organization just over 6 years ago, when trying to think of a name for it, I knew it was going to be performance based, and it had to incorporate yes and. I was like, okay, so what's that going to look like? How do I incorporate yes and? And the live hit me one day. Like, well, you've been living yes and, right? My wife and I, we've been living this mantra of yes and really for the last 20 years, and so that became it. And so what yes and means improvisationally, Bill, is if you and I are actors and we're on stage and we're performing together, that whatever you say to me, I'm going to respond by saying yes and, right? And so, Bill, what country are you in right now?
Right now, I'm in the UAE. I'm in Dubai.
All right. So what is an interesting object you've seen in your travel while you've been there? Like something interesting that you've seen?
The Burj Khalifa.
Okay.
The world's tallest building.
Yeah, the world's tallest building. All right. So if you and I, Bill, were doing a show and we said someone name an interesting object, and you and I say, we'll take the suggestion of the world's tallest building. Right. So you and I are going to create a scene inspired by that idea. It doesn't have to be about that, but it'd be an inspiration of it. And we're on stage, the lights drop, the lights come back up. You and I look at each other. We have no idea what the other person's thinking. Right. And you look at me and you say, all right, man, I'm ready to jump. Right. I don't know exactly what's going on. You know that I'm going to say yes and to your idea. So I might say yes and. I'd say, yes, and woo, our parachutes are packed, right? And you might say, yes, and today I'm jumping without my parachute. And I'm like, yes, and woo, you are going to set a record for the highest free jump without a parachute. And you're
And I'm
going to say,
say,
yeah,
yes, and I'm going to set a record for the largest splat on the cement.
and I say, yes, and you are going to go down in history, my friend. And you're going to say,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm going to aim for the small swimming pool on the 4th floor. And so all you and I are doing in that story is we're just building off of each other's ideas, one yes and at a time. So what does yes and mean? Yes, between you and I, is acceptance. No matter what you say,
Yeah.
you know that I'm going to accept it. And no matter what I say, I know that you're going to accept it. That's what yes is. Yes is agreement. Yes is acceptance. The and is, it's not just good enough to say yes. If I just say yes to all your ideas, I'm forcing you to come up with all the ideas and I'm just agreeing with them. The yes and is the idea back to you. Yes, and our parachutes are packed. Yes, and I'm jumping without a parachute. Boom, 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 boom. The and is how you respond. So yes is acceptance, and is your response. And so you and I are collaborating and telling the story one yes and at a time.
So as I understand it, not having even taken the level 1 course, first of all, a question: do you always say yes and, or is it implied that the yes and is there? And when on stage in improv.
Yeah. Yes. So as a beginner learning improvisation, we teach, I would teach a performer, a beginner, to force themselves to say yes and audibly.
Okay.
As a performer, and then once you start, doing scenes and performing and things like that, the yes and is implied.
Okay,
right.
good.
So you and I could be doing that scene, and you could say, yeah, you could be like, man, I am so ready to jump today, and I might go, man, I can't believe it, our parachutes are packed. Right. I don't have to say yes and, but it's implied because you and I are still, I'm accepting your idea and I'm building off of it. Accept and build, accept and build.
And as much fun and excitement as it must be to be doing that live on stage, especially at the high level that you have learned and trained and performed, what you realized, and if I'm not mistaken, you realize that yes and goes well beyond improv on stage.
Yes.
You started, like you said, you and your wife live yes and. How did that start to become more a part of your life and now a part of your business?
I think, like I mentioned, the light bulbs were going off, and I think they went off really, really quickly. Those first few classes that I took into level 1, here I was, 23, say, married, less than 2 years, working in a corporate space. So I'm kind of looking at sort of corporate dynamics, marriage dynamics. Grew up playing sports, had just finished playing college soccer, 2 years previous. So and then coaching a little bit of high school. So looking at sports, kind of a sports lens, corporate lens, relationship lens. So the thing that hit me right away was, wow, this is it's a collaborative thing. This isn't about me being funny. This is about Bill and I telling a story together. So this is collaborative. So the collaboration, the team dynamic standpoint, the relationship side of things. And then thinking about what we're really doing is that we're creating the rules for healthy relationships. Right? And that's really what yes and is all about. You're creating an environment that fosters and nurtures creativity, risk-taking, and collaboration. And so how do you do that? You do that through yes and. And what are you doing by doing that? You and I were creating a relationship built off of trust, respect, and collaboration. And so here I am working in sort of this corporate space, and I'm going, right? Like, how do I yes and, right, my coworkers? And when I yes and my coworkers, we tend to create sort of a dynamic relationship. And I'm looking at my marriage and going, there's a difference in our relationship and my marriage that's healthier when I'm trying to yes and what my wife is interested in, and compared to when I'm trying to compete with her for what I think that we should be doing. And so if you look at this competition versus collaboration mindset, there tends to be harmony where there is a collaborative mindset, and there tends to be more conflict when there is a competitive mindset. And so that was sort of the beginning of looking at sort of team dynamics, culture, and relationships through this prism of how yes and has bigger implications outside of the theater, off the stage. And then you start to look at yes and from a personal standpoint, which now we get into deeper spiritual and philosophical ways of living, which is how do I yes and everything that is happening to me instead of being in resistance or denial of it. And now we start to really look at what it means to live yes and.
Yeah. So one of the big things that I see coming from this, and I'm going to ask you just to elaborate on it, Travis, is when you're living yes and, whatever, regardless the situation, be it a personal relationship or a business relationship or on a sports team, what you said is when you say yes, that's acceptance. That's taking in the other person's thought, idea without judgment, without qualifying it. And the and part is starting to build on that, right? So
Yes.
if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the key elements involved here is effective listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, Bill, that my wife still might argue that I'm not a great listener, but I am a much better listener
Yeah.
and improvisation has had everything to do with it, because in order for you and I to collaborate, I have to listen to you. I can't collaborate with information that I'm not taking in. And so for an improviser, like my listening early on was horrible because I was in my head, right? I think most of us, whether you're an athlete, whether you're, a professional, a salesman, anything, we can all relate to being in our head. When we're in our head, we are overthinking situations, and we can't be in our head overthinking and listening at the same time. And so that component of listening, and so how do I listen well? How am I a good active listener? Well, that forces me to then let go of my controlling the narrative and let go of thinking about where this is going to go. And I have to be fully present. I've got to be fully present in this conversation so that I can hear and take in everything. And so now improvisation becomes this wonderful tool for developing mindfulness. And a lot of the work that I'm doing now with athletes, whether it's the national team or whether it's youth athletes, I'm using improvisation as a mindfulness tool to have to let go of controlling an outcome and bringing our full attention to the moment and collaborating with the present moment.
And that's a critical point and a great point that you make. You mentioned earlier, Travis, the concept of trust. So if I throw an idea out, I can let go of my fear of it falling short or being argued with in this live yes and philosophy, and I'm more comfortable in throwing ideas out. And where I get that comfort is realizing that whoever is on the other side of this interaction is going to accept it for what it is, or at least understand it for what it is. Whether they agree or not is something else. But it's that element is so missing in our world today, where someone puts an idea out and the next thing you hear is, yes mask, no mask, whatever the thing is. It's I can't wait to give you my opinion, which is the antithesis to what living yes and is.
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. And I think the best use of yes and in a practical standpoint is we talk about trust and respect, and we talk about thriving cultures and thriving relationships are built on psychological safety, right? What is psychological safety? Trust, respect, and value. Do we have psychological safety in politics? Absolutely not, because right now it's an absence of respect and value. So therefore there's no trust. So I'm not actively listening to try to find commonality in our differences. I'm looking to point out our differences and try to prove that you're wrong. And we know that there's going to be nothing good that comes out of two or more people trying to just point out the differences in one another. What a yes and culture, a yes and mindset fosters is it forces me to respect your perspective, Bill, to respect your perspective, and to bring my perspective to it. Your perspective, my perspective. It's not whose perspective is better. It's how can our perspectives come together and yes and one another and find a more inclusive and actually a better solution or a better reality by allowing our differences to live together and therefore actually strengthen one another. And so that's what yes and cultures have the ability to do. It is the strength of diversity instead of trying to squash someone else's perspective. And the world just desperately needs that right now.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think what it does is it leads to more understanding, and it leads to more acceptance. Me being able to accept your view and your opinion doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but
No,
I should be
no.
at least be able to go yes, and even if it's let me think about whatever the case might be. So yeah, it really encourages communication. I can see how that would really come into play in the corporate world and the sports world. How do you bring that to bear in those situations? Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, not at all. No. I think that's a great point. And earlier on, you had said to receive an idea with no judgment. And I think in the past I would have said yes, it's all about receiving an idea without judgment. But yet, the reality is that we judge everything.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm to the point now where I'm like, okay, like I'm not even going to battle my judgment, right? I'm going to accept that anything I say or do is going to be judged, just like I'm judging everything else that's said and done. So I think there's a difference between judging and still being able to collaborate, right? I don't have to like what someone is bringing to the table, but if I am committed to collaborating with it, to yes-anding it, I'm kind of giving myself to put my judgment aside and going, okay, like I think differently here, but I'm committed to finding commonality. I'm committed to finding a yes and so yeah, I'm bringing judgment to it, and I'm still trying to find a way for us to work together. And so I think that quality, you have already mentioned listening. So listening is such a powerful first step. And then when you listen to understand, right, which is empathy, right? When I'm on a team or I'm in a relationship where I'm not just listening, but I'm listening to understand. I'm listening to understand because I care about you, not because I'm listening to understand so that I can now convince you otherwise, right? And that's a major difference. One of the key mantras in improvisation is my goal. Bill, if you and I are performing together, my goal is to make you look good, right? So as I'm on stage, my focus is how can I make Bill look good? And what's your goal, Bill?
To let you.
Yes.
My goal. Yes, and in addition, it's to make you look good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I'm focused on you and your ideas and trying to make you look good. You're focused on me and my ideas and trying to make me look good. Therefore, I'm making you look good. You're making me look good. We're both looking good together. And in the process of doing that, we are having to collaborate off of each other's ideas, right? So instead of me going out there saying, I need to look good, and you're going out there saying, well, I need to look good, and we're missing each other's ideas because we're just focused on ourselves, now you're looking good because I'm supporting you, and I'm looking good because you're supporting me. And anyone else who comes into this relationship or this story or this team, et cetera, we are all trying to make each other look good. Now imagine a workplace or a corporate team that is operating from that mindset compared to a me first mindset. Or imagine a sports team where a player is consciously trying to make his teammates look good, and they're trying to make him or her look good. How is that going to change the performance on the field or on the court? Well, it's going to have a huge transformational impact. And so when we shift our focus from a me mindset to a we mindset, or from a what can I get to a what can I give, it's not decreasing our impact. It's actually increasing our impact, because who doesn't want to work with, work for, work alongside someone who is consciously trying to take care of them? Those are exactly the people that we want to work with and play with or be in relationships with.
Yes, and I have been in the situation in the business world where it is very much a me first and me exclusively, and the spotlight is on me, so don't you make me look bad.
Yeah.
And that is as unhealthy a situation living-wise, much less business-wise, that I can imagine. And the same thing carries over to a team, I assume. I mean,
Yes.
my athletics ended in high school, but a team that is filled with what's known as prima donnas is not going to be as cohesive as a team that is um, uh, all rowing in the same direction, if you will.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and they're looking to say, how can we as a collective do better? Um, so I'm going to throw a little improv at you right now, and I'm gonna give you three ideas and see where you go with it. Okay.
Okay. Let's go.
So New York Yankees,
Okay.
Double Dutch, and 50 Cent.
Something immediately comes to mind there.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I'm sure it does because I've heard it. Share, explain that to the listeners, please.
Yes. So New York Yankees, 50 Cent, Double Dutch. So for anyone who's gotten the opportunity to come and actually see one of my talks or my workshops, probably going on the last 3 or 4 years now. Unless I can't do it, I start off every talk before there's any type of introduction or any type of anything, grabbing a volunteer from the audience, having them face me. They don't know why they're facing me. I hold their hands up like this. They hold their hands up like this. I go stand about 10 yards apart from them. I hold my hand up like this. Then all of a sudden, 50 Cent, the rapper, his song In the Club starts playing, which is boom, 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 boom. All right. So as that song comes on, I start doing this, and then I start doing this, and the other person mirrors me. Sometimes they know what we're doing right away. Other times they don't. But what we are doing is we are mimicking the double Dutch jump ropes. So the two of us are mimicking that we are swinging two jump ropes, and to which I then look at the audience as if to say, who's going to come up here and jump?
Right.
And I wait to see how many people come up and jump in these imaginary ropes.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first time I did this was with the New York Yankees minor league managers. And I'm like, let's see if this works. And this was an old kind of like a fun, not prank, but something that my improv buddy used to do back in the early 2000s. They would go to an actual dance club and do this, and people would make a circle and people would come in and jump. And I thought to myself, what if I started off one of my talks this way? What would happen?
Mm-hmm.
And so now this is what I do. And it just happened to be that the Yankees were the first one that I tried this with. And all of a sudden, people started coming up and jumping. These old grizzled, baseball managers. Some came up and others didn't. And after doing that for a few minutes, the song ends. We roll up the imaginary ropes, and I start my talk. And how I usually start my talk is, why did you come up, or why didn't you come up?
Mm-hmm.
And the obvious answer of why people didn't come up, and I wait for people to say, because I didn't want to look stupid, or I was afraid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the obvious answer. And so I use that as a way to start off my talks, from the standpoint of, we all are leaders in this room, or we all aspire to be better leaders. Once you realize leadership is about doing what needs to be done, having the courage to do what needs to be done any given moment. So once it was established what needed to be done, who had the courage to come up here and do it? And I just reiterate the standpoint, or the idea of, if you want to stand out in life, you've got to be willing to stand up. And those who stand up and have the courage to stand up and look silly and look stupid and make a fool of themselves are often the ones who are putting themselves in positions to be leaders and do what needs to be done. And so that was just a fun way to kind of kick my talks off and kind of let people know that it's not going to be your average talk.
And obviously, I'd heard that story before. Those weren't totally random thoughts, but two real key points to make from that, as I say it. The first, one of the things that I've experienced in sessions with you and in seeing your work online and in person, is your belief in people and doing rather than talking, and actually having an activity rather than just getting up and talking as if you were a school professor. Has that always been how you've approached things?
Can you still hear me, Bill?
Yeah,
Okay,
it froze for a minute. I guess
just for
I
just for
did
a second.
too. So we'll start there, and
Yeah.
whoever's the people will take care of that. So two real important things that come from the idea that you just talked about of the improv, double dutch, invisible ropes, jumping, not jumping, and that is uh, your belief and your approach of doing rather than talking, getting people involved. Is that something that you've done from the start, or is that something you've evolved into?
Yeah, I think I've done it from the start, and I think out of necessity, and then thinking about what is my preferred style of learning, which is being entertained, right? I
Yeah.
think if you go back to school, it's like the best teachers, the best professors were the ones who made it experiential. And so improvisation is experiential. We're just not going to talk about it. We're going to do it. In fact, in improv, it's like, don't tell me, show me, right? Don't tell me what your character is doing. Show me. And so if you bring that into my talks, I could stand in front of a group of people and talk about leadership. And we could talk about confidence, and we could talk about getting outside your comfort zone. And we could talk about all these wonderful qualities, and people would be like, yes, I would do that. But what if we started swinging imaginary jump ropes? Who came up and jumped then?
Mm-hmm.
Are you really courageous? Are you really willing to get outside your comfort zone? And so using different improv games and activities and different videos and different social experiments throughout my talks, it allows us to, and allows the audience especially, to experience these ideas instead of just talking about them. And so again, we learn through doing much more than we learn through listening. And so if we can make it active, if we can make it experiential, if we can make it interactive, hopefully it's more enjoyable, it's more entertaining, and hopefully it's going to be more impactful as people reflect back on, why didn't I get up? Or why did I struggle so much saying yes and in that activity? And why didn't I cross over and collaborate instead of trying to compete with that person? Maybe there's some other aspects of my life where I can be more collaborative. And that's ultimately what I want people to walk away with, is just reflecting on some of these experiential activities.
Well, the other point that I was going to make from that is something that you referenced earlier, and that is doing those things lets us have the chance to get to the other side of fear.
Yeah,
What's on
absolutely.
the other side of fear? And the very first time, for the listeners, the very first time I was aware of Travis and introduced to Travis, I was in the audience, and he asked for a volunteer, and it's not my style to do that, but something drove me, and I stood up, and we got into what you call, Travis, a word toss. Which is basically, well, you tell us what a word toss is.
Yeah, word toss is just an improvisational warm up. I'm supposed to have a show Friday night, and which means I'll be doing a word toss on Friday night with Jesse and I. We're going to do a 2-man show, and a word toss is a way to turn your brain off and turn on your mindfulness responding. And so it's just a good way to get out of your head by not thinking. So word toss is basically just word association. And in the safety of an improv group, you try to give each other permission to just don't edit first thing that pops in your head, just go with it and say it. And that's what you want to do in improvisation. You want to respond instead of think. You want to think about an idea, you want to respond to an idea. So Bill, you and I we can do another word toss again here. So
Sure.
Let's go back and forth. So I'm just responding first thing that pops into my head to whatever word you say to me, and then I give a word back to you, and we just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to only respond to the new word. All right, so here we go, Bill. Desert.
Sand.
Castle.
King.
Tut.
King.
Queen.
Wife.
Marriage.
Blessing.
Church.
Love it.
Heart.
Necessary.
Nestle Crunch.
Yummy.
Tummy.
Full.
Chipotle.
Spicy.
Oh, pepper.
Black.
Moon.
Bright.
Light.
Helpful.
Samaritan.
Good.
Bible.
Powerful.
A strong man.
Schwarzenegger.
Sword. Well, we can end it. We can end it right there, Bill. So the word toss is obviously simply word association, no editing. Sometimes, sometimes the visual might spark another word. Sometimes the word sounding like something might spark another word, but there's just no wrong answer. So all you and I are doing is we're responding to the first thing that pops in our head.
And the reason I bring that up is that's something similar to the exercise that we did when you called me up, which was more, I would throw out a word and you would help continue a story that you were telling based on my response. And I don't need to get into that, but what I want to say from my personal experience is, I mentioned earlier, that's not my normal behavior, is to say I volunteer and get up and do something like that. But once I did and went through it and sat down, I saw what you'd call the other side of fear. So my fear of feeling foolish or whatever the case is, I'd gotten through that, and it's a very rewarding lesson. It's really a good thing for people to learn.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the nature of growth, right? The nature of growth is constantly pushing beyond our comfort zone. It's so cliche. But growth is what happens on the other side of your comfort zone, and we don't grow by being comfortable. We don't get stronger by being comfortable. We don't gain new knowledge by being comfortable. And so we can try to create a safe environment for growth. And that's good, right? We want to, with students, we want to create a safe environment where they can fail and learn and still be okay. With athletes, we want to create a safe environment where they can fail and learn and not feel foolish and not feel less than and not feel that there's going to be punishment or serious judgment. And so, but the thing that prevents us from doing that is feeling like we're not going to be safe if we extend ourselves. And so that idea of psychological safety, right? Psychological safety is environments and relationships built on trust, respect, and value. And the highest performing teams and the healthiest relationships have high levels of psychological safety, trust, respect, and value. Because if I feel trusted, respected, and valued, I know you have my back, Bill, and I have your back. Well, now we can start to take some risks because I'm going to support you and vice versa. And that's why the most important relationships in our life, hopefully, are psychologically safe. Because if I screw up, my wife has my back, right? If I make a mistake, my kids are still going to love me. And so it gives us that safety to stretch outside of our comfort zone and know that we'll be okay.
Bringing that psychological safety, and I love that term, by the way, bringing that into a work environment, I would believe and think that the same holds true dealing with customers. If they're experiencing, if they're in a safety zone where you're not trying to manipulate them or force something on them, if you're looking at influence versus control, it's totally different than a spouse or a child, but nonetheless, it might be a one-time engagement. But if you can exude that feeling of psychological safety, your potential customer and your actual customer are going to really, really benefit and appreciate that.
I mean, for sure. I mean, think about the different things universally as consumers that we're always the environments where we often feel the most vulnerable and where we're looking for referrals and recommendations as far as safety, right? When your car needs some work done, right? We look for that recommendation of someone saying like, oh, you can trust this mechanic because they're going to be honest with you, right? When our health is involved, we look for, medical professionals that we can trust. We're looking for mechanics we can trust. We're looking for, our insurance providers. We're looking at these big life decisions. We're looking for people that we can trust. And so that we're always, right, as consumers, we're constantly sort of subconsciously asking ourselves questions whenever we come into contact with someone is, can I trust this person? Do I trust this
Mhm.
person? Do I feel safe with this person? And when we do, those are relationships that that we'll go back to over and over again.
Yeah. So my friend Bob Berg, who I believe you also know, calls that, I think, the platinum rule of business, which is all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to people that they know, like, and trust. And I think trust is the biggest factor of those three. I mean, certainly they'll know you. They may not like you, but if they can trust you,
Yeah.
that's really important. So um, you talked about collaboration, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you've got a lot to get ready for between your gig Friday night and travel for the next several weeks. Um, but talk to me about a term I've heard you use: radical collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. So the whole term there would be radical collaboration with reality. And that's really what I mean, Bill, by living yes and. So we've talked about how yes and works on stage and how yes and works in a culture, right? Which is about that collaboration piece and that psychological safety
Mhm.
piece. But when I talk about living yes and on an individual basis, that's that radical collaboration with reality. What I mean by that is for each of us, and again, going back to why I call my organization Live Yes And, is whether on a very individual basis, as each of us go through our day, things are constantly happening to us, right? The myth would be that we're controlling what happens. The reality is that we have zero control over what happens to us, which is scary. And yes, and we have 100% control about how we respond to what is happening to us. And so I can't control the pandemic that happened. I can't control my
Mhm.
health. And again, I'm talking about control over influence, right? I can
Right.
influence my health. I can influence my relationships, but I have no control of what is getting dropped in my lap every day.
Mhm.
So that's scary. But I have to say yes to it, right? I have to accept it. Whatever is coming at me and is being dropped in my lap as reality, I have to say yes to it. The quicker we say yes, the quicker we can move to the and, which is where we have power. We have power
Mhm.
in our and. The and is our response. Again, yes is acceptance, and is our response. So, regardless of what is happening to us, I have no control. And I have 100% control over how I
Mhm.
respond to it. So, yes, this pandemic is happening, and I'm going to move my work to Zoom, and I'm going to get to spend more time with my family, and I'm going to do some housework. And
Mhm.
so, or I can be like, this pandemic shouldn't be happening. It's this person's fault. It's that person's fault. This is going to ruin my professional
Yeah.
career. So we can go into that victim mindset, which is all about denial. We're denying reality
Mhm.
because we don't like it. And so you don't have to like what is happening to you, but you have to say yes to it. You cannot progress until you say yes, right? Yes gives us permission now to respond and be proactive. And when our and response is connected to our authentic purpose,
Mhm.
it means we are always responding in a proactive direction, one yes and at a time. Yes and, yes and, yes and. Therefore, our goal is to be in collaboration with reality, radical collaboration with reality, because I don't
Okay.
have to like it, but I have to say yes and to it.
And there's so much we can't control, and if we don't get to the yes, it does. Our only other option then is to be a victim, which is not going to help anyone. So moving this back to where we started into the world of sports. Um, Sports is improv, I think, at its best, without the intent of being humorous, although some sports have been. Um, Talk about how this relates, how the improv relates to, let's just use your favorite sport and the one that you're most focused on right now, uh, soccer or international football, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
And talk about how this comes into play when the team is on the field, on the pitch.
Yeah, right. So sports are just one big improvisation, right? We have a plan, just like all of us have a plan in life, and then we wake up and our day happens, and yes and so sports are the same way. We have a plan, we've preparation, all these things that we are going to try to do, and then the game starts. And it's not that you throw that stuff out the window, but it's like, well, the game is happening. The game is happening in the present moment, in the now, and we have to yes and every moment, every new opportunity. So if you go back to this summer, we were playing a Nations League final against our region rival, who is Mexico, and this is a huge game for a trophy, and everything that can possibly be a challenge or go wrong in one game happened in that game. It didn't go 90 minutes, it went 120 minutes.
Oh boy.
There weren't a few bad calls, there were a lot of bad calls. There was unforeseen injuries. There was really bad mistakes. We trailed in the game on 2 different occasions. There was video replay that got overturned. There were hostile fans throwing things at the players on the field. There were hostility with the players to the players on the field. So everything that happened out there that could go wrong did. But our mindset is still always to yes and. Yes, we just gave up a goal, and we need to correct it, and we need to win the next play. Yes, and that's a bad call. Yes, and we need to adjust how we're playing. These fans are hostile. Yes, and we need to focus on the game, not the fans. So yes, and is, again, it's that radical collaboration with reality. Like you and I were joking before we started the call, as I talk to athletes of all ages, if we're talking about soccer, if you want to be really fully engaged in the moment, which is what mental focus is you can always keep asking yourself, where's the ball? Where do I need to be? Yes, and, right? The ball moved over here. Every time the ball moves, it's a new yes, and. And so where is it going, and how are you going to respond? Where is it going? How are you going to respond? Yes, and, yes, and, yes, and. Everything that happens within that game is an opportunity for yes, and. So our goal is not to not get distracted. Our goal is how quickly do we move on from the distraction and get back at it. And the quicker we can say yes and the quicker we can come back to the present moment, the more effective we're going to be. And the more moments that we can win during a match, the better chance we have of winning that match. Yes and, yes and, yes and.
Brilliant. I love that. So now I am going to draw an analogy between you and someone you may not have expected, but it really speaks to the point and the reason that I do this podcast and all of my work. And that is the commonality between you and John Belushi.
Okay. All right. I'll take that.
I'm sure you will. And the commonality, the common element is that both of you went to an improv theater, you in Boston, he to Second City in Chicago, when you were young in your life and didn't really know where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do necessarily. And you found improv, and that really lit a fire. That really torched your passion, which is fine, but that's not sustainable. What you both did, though, you were able to take that spark and discover your purpose. And once you found that purpose, it reignited that passion, which drives you through. You've become your dream job now, the coaching that you do, the training that you do. He obviously went on to become one of the, if not the finest comedic actor that in modern day.
Yeah.
With an unfortunate end, which I hope the analogy stops there. But the reason I bring that up is I talk about the purpose principle, and that's why I do this show, because I want people to understand that what is absolutely essential is finding our purpose. It may change, it may evolve, we may have more than one purpose, but we have to have a purpose which ignites our passion. And if our purpose doesn't ignite our passion, then we're dead in the water. But without a purpose, our passion will fizzle out. So that's the point I want to make there. Yeah. So you and John Belushi both found something that really ignited you, and you ultimately said, what am I going to do with it? What's the purpose for and then you use that to drive you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Bill. That's fine company to be in from a talent standpoint. But to your point, my purpose is not improvisation, right? My purpose is not sports. My purpose is not business, right? My purpose is to inspire myself and others to live their authentic brilliance, right? I just happen to use improvisation, and I happen to use sports, and I happen to, use, corporate, training. But that purpose is the thing that inspires me and excites me and gets me out of bed every morning. And regardless of what my title is, and I won't be on the national team forever. I hopefully longer, but I won't be there forever. So that title will change. Yeah. And all these different titles of my life will change and are constantly changing. But my true sort of purpose and inspiration of why I do what I do is pretty changeless, and the focus of that intention will continue to change, but the essence of it is there. And I think that helps when we're really clear about what that is for each of us. It gives us that passion and energy, to keep going forward.
Well, I think you just answered what is typically the final question on this show, and that's what's the point? So if you want to elaborate on that, feel free. But
yeah, I don't know much more to say than that. On your podcast, hit 30 seconds rewind. And then you can just listen to it again, and that would be...
Yeah, exactly. You're really good at improv when you can respond before you hear what you're supposed to say yes and to.
That's clairvoyance. That's like improv at the next level.
Well, I am clairvoyant because I knew that having you as a guest on my podcast would be phenomenal, and it has been. You are bright and engaging, and your insights and your humor are helpful. I wish you absolutely the very best, you and the entire men's national team. I hope that all of your corporate and most of your sports teams perform well. I say that as an LSU fan. So when your Georgia Bulldogs are playing LSU, tell them not to worry about where the ball is.
Well, I haven't worked with Georgia this year, so I'm a neutral fan as of right now, Bill.
And you know what? I would hope they do their best no matter what, even if it is against a team that I root for. So I love the work that you do. I really appreciate your time. And all I can do is say thank you so much. Now, to get in touch with Travis, he's all over social media, all of his contact information, including where you can buy the book. And I urge you to buy the book. Will all be in the show notes. Patreon is what you're doing there is phenomenal, and just people check it out, because what you heard today is just the tip of the iceberg from this man. He will help you in business and in life. Travis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate that, and I've had a blast on the podcast here. And enjoy your time overseas, and I look forward to reconnecting next time in St. Louis.
Terrific. Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.